Checking in.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Do we have now
All right.
joining? I
Yep.
believe
Do you
so.
hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good.
Hi, Nav. It's really great to have you with us. May I present Nav Singh, who is going to share with us about Android 13. And let's turn it over to you. Nav, you're a GDE in Android, and how long have you been a GDE?
Um, I guess it's over 2 years now. So I didn't even remember the exact dates. I think it's 2 years almost. It's the second year.
Was it difficult to obtain GDE status?
I don't think so because I think it's your passion. If you are doing stuff, then it's just keep going. Like you're writing articles, giving talks, stuff like that.
So you're GDE in Android specifically.
Yep.
That's amazing. Do you have a screen to share?
Yeah, sure. Let me select. Let me know when you see it.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we're good.
Okay. Should we start or?
Are we ready to rock and roll, everyone? Yes? Liquid in, liquid out. All good?
Okay,
All right,
so
all you, Nav.
okay, sounds good. Thanks. So, hi everyone. My name is Nav Singh, as John introduced me. So, in today's talk, we will go through new features and behavioral changes that are introduced in Android 13. And if we get some time left, we will go through some Android Studio IDE improvements since last couple of versions. So, we will start with the
To begin with, can I ask, why Android? Why did you choose to focus on Android?
um, I think it's a long story, but I will quick just say like I love mobile app development and I started with Android and the tooling it's improving day by day. So it's for me I like whenever I try to work on right now I'm also doing iOS side, but it's a little bit hard, the IDE and all that stuff. But in terms of like in other terms, I think the community support is there and there is a it's open source and that especially you can easily find a community relate like regarding Android, for example, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or like GDG chapters. You can go to meetups, stuff like that. So there are various reasons for that.
Terrific. All right, let's hear you talk.
Okay, thanks. So Android 13, it means the API level is 33. So if you are an app developer, like you are doing Android, and the API, as I said, it's 33. So there are two options like that we need to update when we are trying to update our applications. The first one is the target SDK, and the second one is compile SDK. So what I mean by like when we're saying target SDK, it's basically like we are informing the Android operating system that our application is going to compatible with at least up to these versions. So if you are you are sure like you have done some compatibility checks against Android 13 and you are confident enough that your app will survive all those new changes and behave as expected, you can do this change. And the second one is like as the name suggests, is compile SDK. So compile means like there are new libraries, there are new features that are only available starting with this API. So if you want to access those features, access those libraries, then you need to update your compile SDK so that you can access that new code in your applications to like to write code with those kind of new APIs that are introduced with 13 or you can say 33. So first we will go through the behavioral changes and then we will go through the features and let's go. Let's quickly bring everything on stage. So the first one is the runtime notification permission. Then I will go through just with the list, and then I will go through like a little bit details in next slides. And then there is a new permission for alarm manager. Like if you are having some sort of alarms, we will go into details later. Then there is a granular media permissions. Then there is a new runtime permission for nearby Wi-Fi devices. There is a foreground service task manager. Then there is intent filters. And the last one is the clipboard sensitive data protection, which is introduced in this new OS version. And next we have like new features. Let's bring everything on stage. So yeah, so there is the first one is per app language preferences. Then we have photo picker. It's a standard new tool which is added in this release. Then there is a predictive back gesture. There is a clipboard preview. Then there is a tile API. There are themed icons that, if you know, in Android 12 we have dynamic theming for Android, which is introduced like supported by material themes. And based on the wallpaper, we generate dynamic themes for our applications. Now there is a themed icons based on that concept. Then there is a support for low energy Bluetooth audio, and also there is a support for MIDI 2.0. The last two you can go like you can search by your own, like what is MIDI 2.0 standard and what is Bluetooth low energy devices. And then there is a faster hyphenation for text views, and there is a lot of changes that are going back and forth with hyphenation. Like it was turned off, I guess, in Android Q, and then it's turned again on now. But now this time it's like more improvements are there. So you can learn more about, if you want about hyphenation, you can search with the tag with Android 13 and you can see that. So now we will go through a little bit more details about the things that we just discussed in previous slides. So we have post notifications. This is the new permission flag. Like if you want, if for example, if your Android application is sending or having some sort of functionality which is sending notifications to the user. So in that case, you need to make sure that your application is having the notification permission. Otherwise your app will not able to send the notifications, and it comes under the category of like your dangerous permissions. So that's why it's a runtime. So every time you want to send permission, you need to make sure that your application is having permissions. And this is the sample screenshot that I took from my sample app. So this notification also behaves differently based on the target device. So if your app is not targeting Android 13 and it's running on Android 13, so for example, your user has updated their device to Android 13, but you are still not targeting 13, in that case, you don't have any control like when you can ask for this permission. So there are conditions like for Android 12 or like for the older versions, when your application is running on Android 13, like whenever your application is creating your first notification channel, in that case, it will ask for the notification permission. And after 2 or 3 attempts, I think there is an exact number, I didn't remember, but after those, if user didn't allow this permission, then they will know, like you will not able to ask again for this permission. Like even if you trigger the permission flow, it will not pop up with this dialog. But if you are targeting Android 13, then you have full control for this permission, like any other permissions. Like, for example, if you want to ask for permission at any certain process or after successful finish of any particular task in your application, you can do that. So the best experience that you can achieve with this feature permission is like as soon as you can update your applications to target Android 13, and then you have more control over this. So the next two, like the first one, if you see, there is next 3 permissions. They are called read media image, then there is audio, then there is video. If you remember in the first slide where we discussed the behavioral changes, this is one of them, like granular media permissions. So before Android 13, like as Android developers, when we want access to the users information, for example, you are developing gallery app and you want to access all the images and all that kind of stuff. In that case, you like once we have a permission, we have access to all the storage. Like we can access audios, we can access videos, we can access everything. But with these granular media permissions, So if your application is only required images, you can just use image permission. And if you're targeting only audio or you are targeting video, you can go like accordingly with your with the like you can select the permission that your application requires. And the last one is the use exact alarm. This is very, I think, one of the major improvement I can say. Like even in Android 12, there is a permission called schedule exact alarm, and that is like if you're having any sort of alarm manager related functionality, like if your application is doing some sort of functionality related to the doing some work based on the alarms, then you can use that one. But this permission starting with Android 13, this is only specifically for those applications. Those are highly based, like those are highly coupled with the functionality related to the alarms. Like for example, if you are having calendar application, or if you are having any other application which is basically like the main flow of your application is based on this one. And if you want to use this permission, then there is no any issues like when you are developing your app. But if, for example, your application is not having specific use cases that comes under in the category that your application is eligible for using this new permission, then Play Store, like when you submit your app for the Play Store to publish, in that case, Play Store might reject your application because they might find that you are violating the conditions of using this permission. So you can use this permission, but make sure your application comes under the category like where it is eligible to use this. And there is a one condition, like if you are already using the schedule exact alarms in your app already, which is introduced in Android 12. In that case, you need to like if you want to use this new permission in Android 13, then you need to set the flag for that permission. Like when we define permissions in our manifest, there is a flag that we can add, which says like max SDK, that defines like up to which version we want that permission to work. So in that case, you can define it as like a max SDK 12. And then then system knows that this permit, they will like that permission is only work for the up to that devices, like, and then from 13 you can use this new permission. Then there is another functions that are added in the API introduced with Android 13, which is called downgradable permissions. So if your application, like we can access the permissions that our application have. For example, if our application is having some sort of permissions that we don't need anymore, in that case, there is a function introduced to revoking permissions, which is called revoke self permissions on kill. And it takes a single single element, like a single permission value that you want to revoke. So what system does is like it will wait to kill your process. Like it will not immediately affect, like for example, if your user is already playing or user is interacting with your app and you call this method, it will not immediately affect the functionality or like it will not immediately revoke the permissions. So system will decide like when your app is in, for example, up to some time it's in background, it's in idle mode, system will automatically kill the process. And whenever the new, like next time your application launches, all the permissions will be revoked at that point. Like it will be in effect in next start of your application. So this is the case like when you want to revoke single permission. And then there is a second, which is called a self permissions. So revoke self permission for single, and then for multiple is permissions. So you can pass a list of permissions that you want to revoke from your application. And as I mentioned, that all the processes needs to be killed to trigger this call by the system. So system will determine like when it's ready to kill the process and make these changes applied to your application. Then we have safer exporting for context registered receivers. So in Android 12, we have a requirement for all the activities and all the services, all the receivers that we have defined in manifest to add the component called flag which is called exported. It can be true or false. So exported means like if we set it true, that means other applications that we are exposing our components to other components basically, so that if any other application wants to start some flow in our application, we are exposing some sort of service, some sort of activity that can be launched. So like for example, in Android, we have a main activity which is by default set to true, so that system can invoke the, like that's the entry point for our application. But for some, like your application might have 10 other activities that you don't want to expose, so you can set exported to true for false for those activities. And now extending that function feature, like extending that exported behavior to the receivers. Now we have context-based register receivers that we register during the like for example, when our activity is running or our fragment is running, that we only want to listen some sort of broadcasts when our application is in resumed state. So then now if when we register those receivers, there is a property added into the when we register, which is called which is required to set the flag, which is rather receiver exported or receiver not exported. So this is the sample code. So when we call register receiver, it takes the receiver, like whichever you have implemented. For example, I have dynamic receiver. Then if you have any sort of intent filters, and then the last parameter is like when you try to add the flag, you will see both the options. They are available from the context. It's exported or not exported. And and you can test your application, like how your application works. So on the app if you have device or emulator like Android emulators, you can go under to the developer options, then there is app compatibility changes. And if you see, there is a highlighted component which says like dynamic receiver explicit export required. So when you turn it on, then you will see the effect in your application, and if there is something like broken, you can fix accordingly. Next, we have a photo picker tool. It's basically, I can say, it provides a better user experience from the perspective from the end user as well as from the developer's perspective. It's really good good feature, I can say, that is added at the operating system level. So for example, if we have a gallery application, as we discussed earlier, so if we want to access images, we need to ask for permissions. And if you know that when we want to access any sort of storage, that's comes under the category of dangerous permissions. So we need to access, like, make sure every time that if our application is having permission to access the images or storage of and from the device, which is like sometimes might be a painful, and when there are various reasons about that. But with this tool, we don't need those kind of permissions. Like even the granular media permissions that we discussed earlier, we don't even need those permissions. So there is an intent action available from media store, which is called action pick images, the first point. And by default, user can select image or video. The default limit is 1, so that when we trigger this intent from our application, it opens up the photo picker and user can select a single image or single video at a time. And the UI, I think the main point or main benefit is the consistent user experience. So it provides a consistency across the different applications. So if your device, like end user's device, have 5 different applications installed, that means, and all those applications have some sort of functionality where user can pick images or videos. And if they are using photo picker tool, so it's really easy for the end user because they get the same feeling, same behavior across different applications, which is really helpful. And the last point here is the extra pick images max. So although there is a limit, like by default limit is 1, but with this information, like when we create the intent, we can pass this information using this extra information. Like for example, if you want that user can select 2 images or 3 images, but there is a constraint on that limit also. Like it's supposed to respect some constraints I will explain later. But this is the way that how we can actually provide information to the system that we want to we want to override the default limit. So just a second, let me, okay. Yep. So the default limit, so this is how we can create a intent using, this is the sample code from written in Kotlin. So I created a intent. It's a val means like a final, like it cannot be changed later. Then I am creating intent, passing the action, pick images, then apply it's the Kotlin scope function. And I'm setting the type. So as I mentioned earlier, like user can select images or videos, but for example, if you only want that your user can select images, you can provide here the type. So if only videos or images, you can provide the type information and system will behave accordingly. Then for the max limit, if you see the next line which is commented says media store.get pick images max limit. So that's the function which provides us a number, like how many max, what's the max limit is available on that operating system. So if this for example, if this method returns you 1 or 2, then you need to respect that when you want to override that default limit. So it should respect the max limit should respect this limit. So that's it for, I guess, for topic 2. And here is the UI. The UI also behaves differently. So if you are not overriding the default limit, which is 1, then it opens up in a half border, like it's a bottom sheet. It opens up in half mode, so that users can easily select it. They don't need to go all the way up to the next to the systems toolbar to select a single image. So this is really a great implementation. So, but in the other way, like if you are giving a user more access to select more than 1 images, then it will open up in a full mode with the circles, like a small kind of radio buttons on each of elements, so that user can select, they knows that they can select multiple images there. And this tool also has some limitations. For example, this is only available from, initially it was introduced with Android 13, but with the help of the Play Services updates, it's available from Android 11, which is like, I guess, more 90+% devices cover the mostly we cover the user base under this category. So it's percent from Android 11 to upwards. And next we have a clipboard enhancements. So before we copy some data, we don't get any visual feedback. So our user don't know like what they did. Like some of the manufacturers like Samsung, they did some sort of implementation, like where we see some sort of toast shows up with the information that we copied. But now at the OS level, it's implemented or it's added, so that when you copy something, you can see like what you copy, and it also shows a little edit icon next to it, that if you still want to edit the content that you copy. So in case of non-sensitive, for example, just a raw text you copied, again, that's to the app developers, like how they implemented, if you have implemented some sort of clipboard functionality. So in this case, this is a non-sensitive, so that means the system can shows up the whatever content is copied by the user. So here it's, for example, I have just copy the copy me text, and it shows up, and I can edit. The second category is sensitive content. So in this case, like when we define when we inform the system that this content is going to be sensitive. So in that case, system will not in right away highlight, in the preview section will not show the information right away. So it will say like a tab to view, and then there is a detection. So you need to perform additional step to actually see what you have copied. And it's really important if you are working, for example, in a bank apps or any sort of applications where you are allowing users to copy content like credit cards or their bank information, their personal information. So how we can actually implement the second component, like the by default is there, so we don't need to do anything. But for example, I'm working for a bank, and in that case, we are giving a functionality that user can copy some like their personal information or credit card information. In that case, I need to create a clip data object, pass the information. Here I'm passing hard-coded value. It might be any other values. If you are working with your app, you can pass values from text views or edit fields, stuff like that. And then there is the main important part is here is the apply block. It's going to be apply on the new new plain text object. So with the description, we have access to the description object. Then on the description, we have extras. In that extras, we need to provide the bundle in which we can provide extra information. So the flag, we just need to add the flag, and it takes a Boolean value. And right now, the flag, like it's only available from Android 13. But if you want to make it work for all your devices, like you need, like if you are still not targeting Android 13, in that case, you can or you are not compiling, so that you don't have access to these new components. For example, extra is sensitive constant, you don't have access because you are not compiling against 13. So in that case, you can provide the hard-coded value, which is commented in the last line, which says android.content.extra.is sensitive. So if you are actually in Android, like in Android Studio developing your app, and you are compiling as 13, when you tap on extra is sensitive flag, that's the actual, like the raw value, which is the last line. And that's it. Then we pass the flag, which is true, and it behaves like system will process it like as a sensitive data, and it will not directly show the information or the content that user copied. Then there is a new API introduced for the tiles. So quick settings, if you remember, like when we open the notification panel and when we scroll it down, we see a lot of tiles there, like for Wi-Fi, for mobile internet, for settings, for flashlights, stuff like that. So if your application is having some sort of tiles implement, like a feature that you are adding, if you're having some sort of functionality, before how it works, I actually literally didn't implemented it before. So when I exploring Android 13, I found this API and I implemented small sample. So I can quickly here explain you how this works. So if you want to add a tile, you have implemented a tile service. There is a tile service that we need to implement to make it work. So that whenever user interact with that tile from those tiles, you can actually, your application gets the information like what's happening there. And based on that, you can perform certain actions. So you can learn more about tile service on Android documentation. So here I am accessing the status bar manager. And on that manager, we have a new method called request add tile service. It takes 3 parameters. It takes four parameters. Yeah. So the first one is the component name, like it takes your tile name that you have implemented, which takes then context and then the class name. So the last one is like sample tile service that I have implemented. Then you need to provide the title label for tile label that you want to show, like when you ask for user what this tile is gonna be. And then icon, that icon also will be shown in your tile. And the result executor, like where the result should be handled. For example, because we are asking for this component, like this request is basically same like a permission thing, but it's not a permission. So when there is a user added the tile or they deny it, you get the result code back to actually process if user done successfully finish adding tile, or they deny it, or they just dismiss the dialog, and you can process the result accordingly. So this is from the sample app. So here I have created a simple tile, as I mentioned earlier. There is, when we ask for them, like they will see the preview, like how this tile is gonna look like in the tiles component, like where all the tiles shows up, so that they can easily figure out like what they just added. So it's easy to find for the end user. So there are 2 options, like do not add tile or add tile. So the user can perform any of them. So next we have intent filters. So this is more like security for the Android applications. So before there are some options, like even like if you are just trigger any intent and it doesn't respect the intent filters, then it might ends up like opening up any apps which are not supposed to. So for example, right now I have a like a use case like where I tap on email, it opens up the PayPal application in my phone. So it's supposed not to do that, but it's doing that. So it asks me for login and it just shows up there. It opens up the PayPal. Otherwise, like it's supposed not to do that. It's supposed to like I should handle like that intent only should be handled by the email client, for example, Gmail or any other client. But I guess at the end, PayPal also having those kind of support for that thing, and it shows up for that. And even for sometimes even the Zoom application, it's trying to accept the intents from the maps. So there is no any no relation between Zoom and map functionality, but sometimes that's the reason behind this. Like when we have now intent filters defined, and if any other application wants to fire like trigger the intent and it doesn't respect the intent filters, then that application will not launch or not trigger any activity or any component based on the triggered intent. And it also behaves like it depends on like if receiving app is upgrades to the 13, and then all the intents from the external apps are delivered to an exported component only if they respect the intent filters. So if even if you are not targeting 13, but your target client, like your target application is already on 13, then you need to adopt your code accordingly so that it can work. So this is basically the sample code. For example, I have a application called accessibility stuff, and it has an activity named intent filter activity. I set it to export it true so that any other applications can launch it. Then I have defined the intent filters here. So I say like if there is any action which is like send action, for example, mostly emails or stuff like that, and if it has the MIME type of plain text, then I am up for handling that. That's the basically information we are giving to the system. And let's say we have another activity which wants to trigger that intent. They knows the exact path for our application or our activity, in this case intent filters activity. Then if you see the last component, which is run catching, basically like a try catch of Kotlin version. So I created the intent with the action send, but I commented the type here. So I didn't provide the information about the text playing. And I set the component that I defined earlier. And when the intent is created, also you see the last line which says also. That means like when this intent is created, I also do this thing along the way. So this is a Kotlin scope function. So I tell the system like, okay, launch this activity, and on failure, show me the dialog. If there is something goes bad, like system fails to find the activity, or like the intent filters doesn't match, then show the information in the dialog. So this is how it ends up. So when I launch the intent, it's because I didn't respect the intent filters. So it shows me the error message. This is the system error message. If you see the last line, it says like set message. It's just the throwables localized message. And it says that there might be that activity is not found, or you might does your intent not match its declared intent filter. So we actually get the information, like specific information from the error message, so that there might be a whole issue that we are missing the intent filters. Then next we have per app language system settings. So in the current existing space, we don't have this feature for Android. So if you want to change the language, we need to go to the system settings and change at the system level. So if you have 10 applications and you want to change the language only for single application, then it's a little bit tricky because there is no options. And if that application is not providing some sort of custom support for like a custom language picker functionality in there within their application, then you don't have any options. You need to change at the system level, which changes all the all the apps language. So now with this feature, we have an option like this is also comes under two variants. Like one is like you are just informing the system, hey, I am handling the localized multiple languages. So you just tell the first to the system that user can change a language only for this application, like for my application only. And then the other way is like you can also implement a dialog picker, like the in-app feature. So from within your app, user can select, like you give a certain sort of, like, for example, in menu says change language, and then you show like which languages are available, then user can select. So we will go through the first one first. So we create the file, which is local config under the resources file. Under the resources, we create this file in XML, which says local config, and it takes the parameters of the languages. For example, I have my application gonna support French and English, so I added those two language codes here. The next thing in the manifest of the application tag, we need to add the property called local config. So in here, we reference the file that we just created, which is called local config. And that's it. So after this, there is a new component added in the system settings where user can change the language for only specific apps that are supporting changing language. So here we go to the system in the settings, then we go to the languages and input. Before there is there is no any options for app languages, but now if you see under the languages, it says the set the language for each app. And now when we tap on this is the final screen. It shows up all the applications that are supporting multiple languages and provided the information to the system about the languages. So when you select your application, you will see like in which language you wanna proceed with this application. So this is the second version, like how you wanna go with the, if you want to implement within your application that you don't wanna go you don't wanna use that your user go all the way into the systems then settings, and it might be a little bit troublesome for end users. So you just give a small little function in your application that user can change, so they don't need to switch back and forth. So there are a couple of, this is like two APIs, like one is from, I guess, from Android X, and then there is an API added at the platform level. So here I am showing you the app compat, which is like supporting older versions also. So the first one is like getting the local list. You provide the select a local language tag, and it will give you the list of the selected language. Then you call the app compat delegate.set application locales, and this is basically the result of the previous call. The first call, you pass it here, and it will set the application's language based on that. The third one is like, if you want to reset, it is really easy because you don't need to do anything. You just pass a get empty local list, and it informs the system to like change the language to the system level language. And the last one is to get the list of the languages that your application supports. So these are the four methods that you can use. So for example, first one, you can like bind it with some sort of drop down menu, like you give the menu to the user, then they select language there, you choose the pick the selected locales tag there and pass it to this method. And then from this method's results, you proceed with the next call. And the last two are basically, they are independent. The third one is like, if you just want to reset, you can go ahead with that. And if you want to check the apps languages, you can call the last method. And now we have the predictive back gesture, which is really cool. Animation shows up when you perform the back navigation in your applications. So that this is basically providing the best user, I can say better user experience to the end users, so that they actually can know like where they are gonna be after performing the back gesture. So sometimes your applications, for example, our applications, they perform custom navigation. So when user press the back, they might end up at somewhere they don't expect it, right? So for example, they are doing some transaction and they think they did something wrong on this page, and they might fix it if they go back to the previous page or previous state of the app. But if you are tapping that, like if you are customizing your back navigation, then you might just kill application, like you customize the code there, and when user performs the back gesture, it ends up on the home screen that your app is just kill the process. But with this new feature, system will actually show the animation, like when user like performing the back gesture, and before applying the back gesture, they can actually see the preview, like the content behind the current window, like what's gonna be the next thing if they're gonna perform the back gesture. So for example, if they are at the page where there is no any backstack entries exist in your app, then that means like they're gonna end up on the home screen. So which is like really informative for the end users. And this is a really detailed we can there is a separate talk, I can say. It can take 30 to 40 minutes to explain how we can spot in our Android applications. But the quick easiest way is to, like, if you are not customizing back navigation in your application, you just need one change in your application's manifest tag. In your manifest, go to the application tag, and you will just add the enable on back invoked callback, set it to true, and then, because it's still not available, the gesture animation is still not available in Android 13, but it will be available, I guess, in Android 14 for the for testing. For testing it, you need to go to the developer options, and you turn on the predictive back animations, and you will see how it behaves if, for example, with your applications. Then this is more like a user experience. There is a new foreground service task manager. You might have seen like some notifications like that says like particular application is running in the background, and it's just sticks there because they are just run it as, I guess, a foreground services, and I guess we cannot do much. Like as end user, we don't know sometimes how to stop that. There is a process, like you need to go to settings and see which applications are running, and then stop. But now with this new functionality, users can just stop it like with the one click. So if you see a highlighted component at the bottom of the screen which says one app is active, when user taps on it, it will show the details of all the applications that are actually right now active. And there is an option called stop, so that whenever user wants, they can kill your application. So this is good for end users, but it might impact your applications. If you are performing some sort of work, you need to do it in a way that you inform your user like why your application is doing particular stuff so for so long, and so they don't stop it. And if they stop it, you like fail gracefully, instead of in the state of that where you lost something important that your application requires. Then there is a media controls. It's again user experience, new interface. It's a consistent, and now it also shows the casting devices information, like where it's currently playing. So for example, right now it's playing on my phone, and if we tap on that icon, like that button, it shows up the information that currently it's playing on this phone. Then there is option for pairing for new devices that we can do. And the next one is the themed app icons. So if you know already, there is a dynamic theming, which is like extracting colors from the user's wallpaper and applying it to the themes of applications. Now there is a spot for theming app icons too. So how we can support as app developers, we need to provide information for adaptive icons, and there we provide the important part is here, the last one, which says monochrome, and we need to provide that drawable information, that which is going to be the monochrome icon for our application. So whenever user wants to change the settings, which says like use themed app icons for my application, like for my system at a system level, and when they turn it on, if your application provides this information like the monochrome icon support information, then your app's icon will automatically change to the themed app icon. So this is how we first we define the icon, then we reference it using in the application tag, and Right now, this feature is in beta. So when user taps on like wallpapers and styles, they see themed icons at the very bottom. They can turn it on. And once they turn on, the applications that are supporting this themed icon, like the applications that are they have defined the monochrome icon, they can like the user will see their monochromatic icons for that. For example, if you see the photo picker, you see the very first icon. I added the sample for my testing code lab, and it shows that icon in there. So that's all about Android 13. And this is the really big list for IDE improvements. But as an Android developer, you will love it because there are a lot of features, a lot of improvements in Android Studio. The first one is accessibility scanner, right now integrated within the IDE. So for example, if you are still working with the XML layouts, we can see the errors and lint warnings during the development. So if you are missing content description, if you're having color contrast issues for your icons, if you have touch target size issues, the system will shows you errors during the development, which is really easy to fix, or I can say fixing the bugs related to accessibility at the early stage of development. Then we can connect the devices over Wi-Fi. Then there is a device picker. There is a Google Play SDK index integrated with the Studio. So when you add any third-party SDKs, the Google Play SDK index will check if like that library is how that library is behaving. Like for example, in terms of the health, like if it's maintained well or not, if that version is still supported or not, and you will see the errors and you can update accordingly. Then there is app quality insights. This is basically the integration of Firebase with your application. So if you are having Firebase Crashlytics dependency, like you are using Crashlytics, you will see the information within the Android Studio. You don't need to switch back and forth to see like, oh, this is the crash. You need to figure out where it is happening in your application. But with this, you just need to configure the Firebase and you will see all the information from the IDE. Then there is a revamped logcat. There is a live edit. This is specifically for Compose. If you know, there is a new UI toolkit for Android development where you can design beautiful user interface using this declarative UI framework. There is a multi-preview annotations. Then there is a recomposition count. There is a device mirroring, like we don't need to use any third-party tools to mirroring our real devices to our screens, or if you just connect your real device, it will pops up within the Android Studio. So you don't need to use tools like Visor or any third-party tools to mirroring your screen. Then there is a visual linting. So it's really helpful if we are having developing supporting different form factors. And if you go to the layout inspectors, I guess, or I think there is a layout inspection. So it will shows up like the different issues that your particular screen have. For example, if you're using any component which is not gonna be work perfectly on tablets, but it's working fine for mobile. So you will see actually the error in there, like it says like use navigation rail for tablets, use bottom navigation for these kind of devices. Then there is a resizable emulator. So right now, if you know, we are having like foldable devices, we have tablets, we have phones, and if we are supporting multi form factors, then we might end up with like firing up 3 different emulators or 3 different devices to actually test our application. But to avoid that kind of situations, we have resizable emulators, so you can test everything within a single emulator. So it can be resized to the tablet, it can be resized to the foldable, it can be just like a single screen phone. And the last one is the emulated Bluetooth. So I know these are very big list of changes. You can check the Android Studio documentation, I can say, but most of these changes are right now in the stable version available. They are available in the stable version of Android Studio. But as the time I created these slides, they are available, I guess, in mostly in early versions, like in Canary channel or in release candidate, I think in beta channel. But if you get install the latest Android Studio, which is, I guess, let me quickly check which one is that. So it's Dolphin. So if you install Dolphin, you will get all these features in there and you can play with them. So that's all for this talk. I hope you learn something new and you are ready to play with Android 13 and new IDE improvements. And it might push you to start with Android development if you are still not doing it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nav. That was very great. I
I'm
wanted to just open it up
surprised.
for a question or two. If someone has something that they'd like to ask Nav, go ahead.
I'm impressed how much Android Studio changed during the last 5 years. I was learning Android development back then and like, what?
Yeah, that was, yeah, at that time it was not that, it's not perfect.
There is nothing perfect in this world. Absolutely.
Yep,
Thank you, Nav.
but it's improved a lot. Yep.
Are you
Yeah, no
making
worries.
money with Android development, may I ask?
Yeah, I'm a professional mobile software engineer. I'm working at Manulife. It's a health insurance company in Canada.
I see. So you're developing the Android apps specifically?
Yes, also doing iOS too sometimes. Yeah.
And comparing this experience, which one would you prefer?
Yeah, my first preference is always Android, but I love a new declarative framework, which I just say is like Compose for Android, and then we have Swift UI, which is for iOS. So it's really easy. There is a learning curve, but I think it's easy to now going back and forth with iOS and Android. Like it's easy. They are pretty much same, and the language wise also it's same. Like iOS is using Swift and Android is using Kotlin. They look pretty much same. There is a little bit differences, but it's easy to do. So I just started with the iOS.
But you're sticking with the native app development.
Yeah, native app. Yep.
Any reason for that?
There are a couple reasons. The first one is like where I'm working, we have native apps. So I'm not spending too much efforts for learning other cross-platform stuff, with platforms like Flutter or React. And other things, I think even if we want to do some sort of cross-platform, it's like we can use KMM, which is Kotlin multi-platform, to share just the business logic and then have like the native UIs for both platforms like iOS and Android, and then we can share the business logic using Kotlin multi-platform. So that's I'm also kind of exploring, but at the moment, just high focus on Android and iOS native stuff.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. We're going to move over to Roman Jaquez, but let's just take 5 minutes to allow you to do whatever you want, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Nav. Thank you. It was really big learning curve for yourself and for me, and I hope for our attendees as well. Really appreciate having you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Okay.
All right. So take a minute or two, and then we'll tune in for Roman. There's this pretty face. Hi, Roman.
How you guys doing? Hi, John. I'll let you guys have your break, and then we'll come back with more GDG Hudson Valley DevFest 2022. So see you in a minute, guys.
Yeah.